turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a woman telephoning a tourist office to ask about free activities. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good morning, this is Burnham Tourist Office, Martin speaking.
Oh, hello. I saw a poster about free things to do in the area, and it said people should phone you for information. I'm coming to Burnham with my husband and 2 children for a few days on June the 27th, or possibly the 28th, and I'd like some ideas for things to do on the 29th.
Yes, of course. OK. Then let's start with a couple of events especially for children. The Art Gallery is holding an event called Family Welcome that day, when there are activities and trails to use throughout the gallery.
That sounds interesting. What time does it start?
The gallery opens at 10 and the Family Welcome event runs from 10:30 until 2 o'clock. The gallery stays open until 5, and several times during the day they're going to show a short film that the gallery has produced. It demonstrates how ceramics are made, and there'll be equipment and materials for children to have a go themselves. Last time they ran the event there was a film about painting, which went down very well with the children, and they're now working on one about sculpture.
I like the sound of that. And what other events happen in Burnham?
Well, do you all enjoy listening to music?
Oh, yes.
Well, there are several free concerts taking place at different times, 1 or 2 in the morning, the majority at lunchtime and a couple in the evening, and they range from pop music to Latin American.
The Latin American could be fun. What time is that?
It's being repeated several times in different places. They're performing in the Central Library at 1 o'clock, then at 4 it's in the City Museum, and in the evening at 7:30 there's a longer concert in the theatre.
Right. I'll suggest that to the rest of the family.
Something else you might be interested in is the boat race along the river.
Oh, yes. Do tell me about that.
The race starts at Offord Marina to the north of Burnham and goes as far as Summer Pool. The best place to watch it from is Charlesworth Bridge, though that does get rather crowded.
And who's taking part?
Well, local boat clubs, but the standard is very high. One of them came first in the West of England Regional Championship in May this year. It was the first time a team from Burnham has won. It means that next year they'll be representing the region in the National Championship.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now, I've heard something about Paxton Nature Reserve. It's a good place for spotting unusual birds, isn't it?
That's right, throughout the year. There is a lake there as well as a river, and they provide a very attractive habitat. So it's a good idea to bring binoculars if you have them. And just at the moment you can see various flowers that are pretty unusual. The soil at Paxton isn't very common. They're looking good right now.
Right. My husband will be particularly interested in that.
And there's going to be a talk and slideshow about mushrooms, and you'll be able to go out and pick some afterwards and study the different varieties.
Uh-huh. And is it possible for children to swim in the river?
Yes, part of it has been fenced off to make it safe for children to swim in. It's very shallow, and there's a lifeguard on duty whenever it's open. The lake is too deep, so swimming isn't allowed there.
OK, we must remember to bring their swimming things in case we go to Paxton. How long does it take to get there by car from Burnham?
About 20 minutes, but parking is very limited, so it's usually much easier to go by bus. and it takes about the same time.
Right. Well, I'll discuss the options with the rest of the family. Thanks very much for all your help.
You're welcome.
Goodbye.
Bye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 2. You will hear a recorded message giving information about an animal park. First, you will have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully to the first part of the message and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to the Australian Wildlife Park Information Line. The Australian Wildlife Park is very proudly owned and operated by an Australian family, John and Amanda Brooks, who operate the Australian Wildlife Park with their children, David and Sandra. The family doesn't receive any government assistance. It's solely funded by tourists visiting the park. Thank you for your support and assistance. When the Brooks family purchased the Australian Wildlife Park in 1987, the park housed a small collection of animals and birds on a modest 5-acre or 2-hectare property. A few years later, the park doubled in size when the family purchased the adjoining property. Also, the collection of animals started to boom. In May 2003, the family designed and built a new park in the public open space. Once again, more than doubling in size. The park now features about 200 species with more than 2,000 head of animals, birds and reptiles. Regarding the entry fee, adults pay $23, children aged 3 to 14 pay $10, aged pensioners are $17, and students are $16. One of the great things about the Australian Wildlife Park is that all of the attractions are included in the entry fee. No extra money is needed around the park, so make the most of your experience. All shows, talks, photo opportunities and animal food are included in your entry fee. In addition, the Australian Wildlife Park is open every day of the year from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m, except Christmas Day, 25th of December.
Before the final part of the message, you now have 20 seconds to look at questions 16 to 20. Now answer questions 16 to 20.
Several attractions are available to visitors to the Australian Wildlife Park. Firstly, you can meet the koalas between 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Here, people can view the koala colony in a natural environment. Another attraction is to feed the kangaroos between 9 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Visitors can take a walk through the kangaroo enclosure, viewing them in a natural environment. Kangaroo food is provided and the kangaroos are very friendly. Also enjoyable are the wombats. At 11 a.m, 2 p.m. and 3:45 p.m, there are interactive shows where the team is delighted to introduce you to these popular animals. Other attractions that may interest you are an interactive farmyard, suitable for children of all ages. Animal food is provided and the animals are very friendly. In addition, the working farm is where the country comes to town. Visitors can milk a cow, bottle feed a lamb, watch farm dogs gathering the sheep. All the excitement of a real Australian farm. When they ask for volunteers, be sure to put your hand up. Everyone can get involved. We at the Australian Wildlife Park hope all our visitors have an enjoyable time. See you soon!
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear two students called Helen and Jeremy, who are studying creative writing, discussing a project for their course which involves writing and illustrating stories for children. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hello, Helen. Sorry I'm late.
Hi, Jeremy, no problem. Well, we'd better work out where we are on our project, I suppose.
Yeah, I've looked at the drawings you've done for my story, The Forest, and I think they're brilliant. They really create the atmosphere I had in mind when I was writing it.
Oh, I'm glad you like them.
There are just a few suggestions I'd like to make.
Go ahead.
Now, I'm not sure about the drawing of the cave. It's got trees all around it, which is great, but the drawing's a bit too static, isn't it? I think it needs some action.
Yes, there's nothing happening. Perhaps I should add the boy, Malcolm, isn't it? He would be walking up to it.
Yes, let's have Malcolm in the drawing. And what about putting in a tiger? The one that he makes friends with a bit later. Maybe it could be sitting under a tree, washing itself.
And the tiger stops in the middle of what it's doing when it sees Malcolm walking past.
That's a good idea.
OK, I'll have a go at that.
Then there's the drawing of the crowd of men and women dancing. They're just outside the forest, and there's a lot going on.
That's right. You wanted them to be watching a carnival procession, but I thought it would be too crowded. Do you think it works like this?
Yes, I like what you've done. The only thing is, could you add Malcolm to it without changing what's already there?
What about having him sitting on the tree trunk on the right of the picture?
Yes, that would be fine.
And do you want him watching the other people?
No, he's been left out of all the fun, so I'd like him to be crying. That'll contrast nicely with the next picture where he's laughing at the clowns in the carnival.
Right, I'll do that.
And then the drawing of the people ice skating in the forest.
I wasn't too happy with that one. Because they're supposed to be skating on grass, aren't they?
That's right, and it's frozen over. At the moment, it doesn't look quite right.
I see what you mean. I'll have another go at that.
And I like the wool hats they're wearing. Maybe you could give each of them a scarf as well?
Yeah, that's easy enough. They can be streaming out behind the people to suggest they're skating really fast.
Great. Well, that's all on the drawings.
Right. So you finish writing your story and I just need to finish illustrating it, and my story and your drawings are done.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So the next thing is to decide what exactly we need to write about in the report that goes with the stories and how we're going to divide the work.
Right, Helen.
What do you think about including a section on how we planned the project as a whole, Jeremy? That's probably quite important.
Yeah, well, you've had most of the good ideas so far. How do you feel about drafting something? Then we can go through it together and discuss it.
Okay, that seems reasonable. And I could include something on how we came up with the ideas for our 2 stories, couldn't I?
Well, I've started writing something about that, so why don't you do the same and we can include the 2 things?
Right. So what about our interpretation of the stories? Do we need to write about what we think they show, like the value of helping other people or that sort of thing?
That's going to come up later, isn't it? I think everyone in the class is going to read each other's stories and come up with their own interpretations, which we're going to discuss.
Oh, I missed that. So it isn't going to be part of the report at all?
No. But we need to write about the illustrations because they're an essential element of children's experience of reading the stories. It's probably easiest for you to write that section, as you know more about drawing than I do.
Maybe, but I find it quite hard to write about. I'd be happier if you did it.
Okay. So when do you think we can get this ready?
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear a talk from a series of lectures on the survival of our planet. Professor Sampson talks about endangered species of flora and fauna. First, you'll have half a minute to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully to the talk and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today's topic in this series of lectures on our planet is about ensuring the survival of our very important plant and animal species. In this lecture, I want to discuss one way that we can do this. No one will ever see a huge dinosaur thundering through the forest. No one will ever see a paradise parrot flash its rainbow colours across the sky. The fact is that many animals and plants have been wiped out. Sadly, they are extinct. It is too late for them. Extinction is forever. We can't do anything about the species that have already disappeared. But today, there are many animals and plants that could still become extinct in the future if we do not act now. They are endangered. The African elephant and rhinoceros have become endangered because of the value of their tusks. Australian parrots and reptiles are smuggled onto planes because certain people in other countries are prepared to pay thousands of dollars for them. And there are many other species around the world that are endangered because they no longer have a place in which to live and reproduce safely. The main cause of extinction is the destruction of habitats. A habitat contains all that a living thing needs to survive: space, light, water, food, shelter, and opportunities for reproduction. The population of the world is growing rapidly, and this is placing great demands on land and resources for housing and for growing food. When vegetation is cleared and swamps are drained for agriculture, mining and suburbs, or when rivers are dammed to store water, plants are destroyed and animal life is threatened. In other words, humans are changing and destroying the habitats of animals and plants, which is in turn reducing their chances of survival. So how can we conserve habitats and help save endangered species? Well, one way is to protect their habitats permanently in national parks or nature reserves. National parks have been created in many countries. They encourage people to enjoy the beauty and diversity of the animals and plants that live there without harming them. By supporting and visiting these parks, people can become more aware of the species that live there and how the parks work to protect them. It is very important that, when visiting a national park, we keep them safe for future generations of plants and animals by obeying a few rules. Firstly, follow the fire regulations. Don't throw cigarettes or build fires, except at certain times of the year in especially allocated areas and facilities. Secondly, remember to leave pets at home. Pets, such as cats or dogs, can hunt birds or other small animals. Some pets might even escape and become a serious threat. Thirdly, place all rubbish in a bin or take it home. Plastic bags or leftover food are dangerous to the animals and harm the environment. Don't pick the flowers or damage the plants. Flowers create the next generation of the plant. Also, for the same reason, birds' eggs must be left in their nests. The loss of species in the past is sad. However, there is hope for the future. Despite the demands of our increasing population, we can work to protect the plant and animal species we still have. So I would like to conclude by saying that I believe that, with strong public awareness and support of these national parks and reserves, the future of endangered species can be ensured.
That is the end of the listening test. You now have half a minute to check your answers.